It is Thursday, September 21st. Iran threatening to raise the stakes to nuclear levels as the Obama-era nuclear deal hangs in the balance.
But the president's been quite clear and articulate as to his concerns about the agreement itself.
And President Trump now ready to take action. We are live in Washington.
I believe that Graham Cassidy really will do it the right way. There's tremendous support from Republicans.
Also, the president throwing his support behind the new bid to repeal Obamacare. If it passes, how will the healthcare system change? We are breaking all of this down.
The Dodgers are good. Look out. Oh, my goodness.
This is so awful. Horror near home plate. A toddler hit in the face by a 105-mile-per-hour foul ball. Now one of the most storied franchises in Major League Baseball is demanding change. Fox and Friends First starts right now.
All right, good morning. A live look up 6th Avenue here in Midtown Manhattan. You're watching Fox and Friends First on this Thursday morning. I'm Rob Schmidt.
And I'm Heather Childers. Thank you so much for starting your day with us. Another big one and busy one on tap. A brand new threat from Iran is how we begin as the nuclear deal begins to unravel. Now, President Trump still has not announced whether the U.S. will in fact keep the agreement.
Yeah, today at the UN, the president will focus on escalating tension and the mess with North Korea right now as he meets with the leaders of Japan and South Korea.
Garrett Tenney is live for us in D.C. with the latest developments. Good morning, Garrett.
Heather and Rob, good morning to you. President Trump is a longtime critic of the Iran nuclear deal, and he again went right after Iran in his speech at the UN General Assembly on Tuesday, saying he believes the nation is still pursuing a nuclear weapon. Well, that prompted reporters to ask him yesterday whether or not the U.S. will withdraw from the nuclear deal, and the president played it coy.
Have you decided to stay or to leave?
Well, I have decided.
Okay. Can you tell us what your decision is?
I'll let you know.
And shortly after that, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson met with the parties of the nuclear deal and said, while Iran may be meeting its obligations, it is clearly violating the spirit of that agreement. President Trump also had some harsh words for North Korea in his UN speech, which the leaders of South Korea and Japan are now applauding, while they also call on other world leaders to take tougher action against President Kim Jong-un's government.
China and Russia has supported this resolution, and so we have to have their cooperation. Whether or not this can be implemented or not, well, this has to be implemented to make North Korea change its policies. Now is not the time for dialogue. Now is the time to apply pressure.
And North Korea's foreign minister also weighed in on President Trump's speech yesterday, saying Mr. Trump sounded like a barking dog. We'll likely hear more from him about that during his speech at the UN tomorrow. Heather and Rob?
He always has an interesting response.
He certainly does. All right, Garrett, thanks so much. And the left continuing to hammer President Trump for his hard stance and that speech when he was talking about a nuclear North Korea.
But Washington Times columnist Charles Hurt, he says that liberals should ask why former President Obama let it get this far to begin with.
I just have a hard time understanding why it is that that advising North Korea, advising Rocket Man, that if you do attack one of our neighbors or attack the United States, you will be annihilated. I think that that very clear message is something that's very, very important. Listening to Democrats talk about all of these things that Trump didn't address or didn't address properly or didn't respect, all of these problems were given to us by Barack Obama. And whether it's Russian run amok, whether it's nuclear North Korea or ISIS on the march or the mayhem in Syria and Iran, all of this was bequeathed to us by his predecessor. Right. And so the idea of trying something different is actually, I think, probably a pretty smart idea.
And now to this Fox News alert. I can't quit following this story. Yeah. Rescuers in Mexico City, they're working around the clock to save a 12-year-old little girl who is trapped underneath that school that was destroyed by the devastating earthquake.
Yeah, it's really an epicenter of this story. Crews unable to pull her out at this point, but they have been able to get her water and oxygen. 11 other children already have been rescued from the rubble of this school.
Aquí, se te ven, mi amor, por ahí. No vais a raspar. Ahora por allá, bebé. Sácala por allá.
That's just incredible. The 7.1 quake, leaving at least 21 little kids and 4 adults at that school dead.
Wow. But more than 240 people total have died across the city, but some officials say that that number could reach 1,000. I hope they get her. Yeah, and some others, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. And another major disaster, Puerto Rico, waking up in total darkness this morning after taking a direct hit from Hurricane Maria. The entire island now without power, and authorities are warning it may not be returned or turned back on to everybody. It could take months to get that to happen. And on top of that, more than 2 feet of rain falling in parts of the country, turning streets into raging rivers. Look at that. Officials saying, quote, the island is destroyed.
Well, President Trump tweeting this. We are with you and the people of Puerto Rico. Stay safe. Can you imagine 3.5 million people in the dark, no power?
I cannot imagine that. Yeah. It could take a long time to get that power back on, and what a storm and what a season it's been so far. Janice.
Yeah.
Are we done with it yet?
You know, Maria, are we talking about Maria or the season?
The season.
We're certainly not done with the season.
No, the season lasts until November 30th, unfortunately, and we could have more storms on the way. But for now, we are watching Maria. I mean, incredible wind gusts in excess of 130 miles per hour across not only Puerto Rico, but the U.S. Virgin Islands. Just an incredible storm. Still packing winds of 115 miles per hour. It went over mountainous terrain of Puerto Rico. It disrupted the storm a little bit, weakened it, but it still has warm water ahead of it. So we think that it has the potential to strengthen a little bit, but we are hoping it goes east of the Turks and Caicos, east of the Bahamas, and east of the U.S. Fingers are crossed. Here's the latest advisory. As you can see, hoping everything is okay in the Turks and Caicos and the Bahamas. And it looks like, fingers are crossed, we're still going to have to monitor this, but it looks like this will miss the U.S. next week. So we will continue to follow it and, of course, bring you the very latest from Puerto Rico as well. Back to you, Rob.
Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, they need a break.
They do.
Certainly do. All right, Janice, thanks so much. President Trump throwing his full support behind the last-ditch effort to repeal and replace Obamacare, but he is calling out Republican holdout Senator Rand Paul.
Now, the president tweeting, Rand Paul is a friend of mine, but he's such a negative force when it comes to fixing health care. Graham Cassidy bill is great, ends O-Care. The new bill aims to shift more power and funding away from Washington and back to the states.
And President Obama now breaking his silence about the GOP's attempt to undo his signature health care law.
When I see people trying to undo that hard-won progress for the 50th or 60th time, it is aggravating. It's certainly frustrating to have to mobilize every couple of months to keep our leaders from inflicting real human suffering on our constituents.
Well, the Senate is set to vote on the new bill next week, because they're up against the deadline. So what are the chances that it will pass? And exactly what is in the new bill?
Yeah, that's the big question. Here to break it down for us, Brian Brenberg, chair of the program in business and finance at the King's College in Manhattan. Brian, thanks so much for coming on this morning.
Good morning to you.
Good morning. Yeah, and you know, that's the big question is what exactly changes about this? You know, one analyst that I heard that I really think I agreed with said, you know, at the end of the day, we're still going to have socialized health care. At the end of the day, Obamacare still in a lot of ways wins the war. We're just trying to figure out how to implement it in a way that seems a little bit more conservative. Does that sound?
Sort of. The money stays the same. There's still money coming from the federal government.
It keeps 90% of it.
That's right. The big difference is the decision about how to spend the money is going to happen at the state level, not the federal level. And that could create some very big differences depending on what state you're talking about. For instance, if you're talking about a red state like Texas, you could see some very big reforms, dropping some of the coverage mandates that were included under Obamacare, changing Medicaid. You could see it moving in a more market-oriented direction. In a place like New York or California, you could see it go very opposite here, actually more toward a single-payer system. So you could get a lot of diversity in the United States around health care if this bill passes.
You know, Rand Paul is the one Republican who has come out and said that no, he will not vote for this at this point. They need 50 to come on board if they decide to bring this up next week. And his argument is that, what we're just saying, it does not appeal Obamacare. But when he was voting for the, skinny Obamacare bill, he did vote for that. So the difference being that this takes what block money and gives it to the different states, but some get different amounts than others.
Yeah, it's not quite clear in principle why Rand Paul is opposing this bill versus the one that he voted for. I think he has some explaining to do there. He's right that this isn't a repeal of Obamacare. It's just a repackaging and a repurposing, moving decision rights and money down to the states. That's a big deal. That's federalism, but it's not a complete repeal of Obamacare. If that's his standard, he's right, but you see some inconsistency in the decision.
And this bill actually existed before.
It did.
So they've discussed this before.
Yeah, it's been around for the better part of a year. It took a back seat when we had the other repeal plan on the table. Now that that's gone, this is back again, but at the very last minute, of course.
This is the backup plan. Let's go to a couple of screens here to show you. Here's just a list of the governors that are against this bill. Of course, right there at the top, if we can pull that up, is a big critic
John Kasich of Ohio.
President Obama, Republican, or President Trump. But John Kasich right there at the top of the list. A couple other swing state governors as well. There are a number of people against this bill, but a number of people that aren't on this bill as well. I guess at the end of the day, the question is, does this get through?
Well, look, it's going to debate. When you're talking about the decision of one or two senators, you never know. It can change in a heartbeat. I think what you have going on for the states, you look at some of those governors who oppose this.
Who did or did not expand Medicare to begin with, and that depends how much money they get this time.
Money gets shifted here, probably from blue states to red states. But look, this is a big deal. Governors have 2 years to figure out how to do health care in their states. That's a very heavy lift. The federal government, Congress, is basically saying, here, states, you solve this problem because we we can't seem to do it.
Just quickly, though, previous issues that are
pre-existing
covered.
Conditions.
Pre-existing conditions.
The president
That's a big
saying that will be on the bill.
It is, yeah. Look, I don't think it's quite as bad as critics are saying. The bill still requires states to have affordable options in place for people with pre-existing conditions, but there's more flexibility there, so things are going to change. Again, we talk about red states.
Who determines that?
It's going to be the governors. It's going to be the state legislatures and the governors that are going to try to make an appeal if they want to bend some of the pre-existing coverage conditions. So it's on a state-by-state basis. Depending on where you live, things could change a lot or a little.
We could talk about this for another 20 minutes.
You bet.
If we could. There's so much to talk about. There's a lot to read about here.
People, so they need to know.
It certainly does. Brian, thank you so much.
Good to be here.
Well, the time now is about 10 minutes after the top of the hour. Finally, a victory for our veterans. Finally, how the Trump administration just took aim at the VA to help our heroes get closer to the health care that they certainly deserve.
And the Apple Watch that you just coughed up $400 for might be bad.
What?
The crucial defect Apple just admitted to. We'll talk about that.
And that's school spirit for you, the officer who is going viral for all the right reasons.